and hear from Andras Cser about cloud security market trends. And as Kim said before, he's a VP and Principal Analyst for Forrester's. So with that, Andras, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Larry. Yeah, I'm an analyst here at Forrester, looking at all sorts of things, including cloud security. And what I'd like to talk about today is just some of the aspects of security in the cloud, how people are securing their assets in cloud workloads. What are some of the elements, some of the key issues in this space, what we're seeing, where we're seeing this market going. So let's just jump in real quick. Basically, one of the interesting things about the cloud is that the cloud really pulls the CISO or security professional in a lot of different directions, right? It's no longer obviously a question, as is shown in number 1 in the bullet bubble in the upper left-hand corner, that the cloud is a viable alternative. We all know it is. We were actually seeing a huge movement towards the cloud in almost all areas of IT, from personal productivity, storage, compute, really security. All areas have been moving to the cloud, right? So the cloud really offers irresistible benefits in terms of moving capital expenditures to operational expenditures. Number 2, right, a lot of business really procure cloud services in ways that that's just been really unimaginable, say 10, 15 years ago. So a lot of business folks often take out their credit cards, right? And they basically pay for $20,000, $30,000 a month and expense it on their personal credit card just to be able to get to that cloud service, to that cloud offering. So it's really something that is not only a difficult thing to coordinate, but the security of all this is just a huge, huge nightmare for a lot of security and CISO organizations. Obviously, number 3 is the CISO cannot say no all the time. So what this really means is that as CISOs have been accustomed or really integrated into an organization, people have gotten used to CISOs saying no to every initiative, right? The whole problem with this is that if the CISO says no all the time and they introduce sanctions all the time and things that prevent people from working effectively, they are just going to be worked around. So basically, the security organization has to become and change from the department of NO, so no, to the department of KNOW, to understand what is happening and understand where the market is going, understand the security threats, understand how the internal IT and IT operations and IT security can actually cooperate and work with cloud providers and line of business folks. Number 4 is that really the data center has become very much loosely coupled, right? So we got a lot of workloads in the cloud, a lot of things that are just out there, and we are struggling. CISOs and security professionals are struggling with connecting those workloads in the cloud to our on-premises environments. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a second. And obviously, security is struggling to reduce the cloud security risks. We all have to answer to our auditors. Although we've seen that a lot of organizations are now starting to realize that using cloud services, using cloud security services is not only beneficial from the pure operational efficiency reduction improvement perspective, but it's also very important because most people have realized by now that the security they can actually create or maintain on-premises with on-premises workloads is actually going to be lower or worse than what they could do using a cloud-based offering, cloud service provider or SaaS offering, etc. So in short, right, the CISO is really like this little boy in the foreground in red shorts, standing right across the tatami of a major sumo player. So basically, the cloud is an uneven handshake. A lot of the criteria, a lot of the security constraints are actually not being set by the CISO, but by the cloud providers. So what can we do about this, right? So how can we change this is in essence one of the topics we're going to talk about today. So what is cloud security? So it means a lot of things to a lot of people. It is basically answer to three different types of questions, right? What are some of the interfaces that our company has to be able to work with our cloud providers? So how do we connect our on-premises stuff to the cloud? So this is what we call security to the cloud. How can a cloud provider like AWS, Salesforce, cStor, or other organizations prove to us that they are secure? So this is basically mainly certification work, standards, compliance, etc. But also it goes beyond this, and it just expands into using third-party products, etc. This is largely security of workloads in the cloud. The third element that is also interesting is basically how can our company make its internal security better? So basically, how can we source cloud-based services that make our own on-premises infrastructure more secure, or make our cloud-based infrastructure more secure? And obviously, what are some of the organizational implications of cloud and cloud security to our IT security organization? Are we becoming architects in security, losing some of the control inevitably? So this is all good questions to ask. So basically, we kind of look at the cloud security along these three areas. Obviously, this is the prepositions thing. It's basically the same content, the same ideas, right, and described here visually. So security in SaaS, it means this is where the secure thing is in SaaS or platform as a service or infrastructure as a service vendor. Security to SaaS applications, so how you connect from on-prem to cloud-based offerings, and security from SaaS operations, which really means how a cloud provider can, or an MSSP, provide better on-premises or cloud-based security. So this is just, for the definition wonks, right, that want to know more about this. So why is cloud security different or unique, right? It's a unique blend of activities, products, and problems. So the cloud is clearly, so number A of the two-component glue, if you will, right? Component A is that the cloud is not just the new delivery platform, right? It's not just a compute or storage platform. It comes with a lot of its own security elements, hypervisor security limitations, data network protection, network path limitations, etc. So unless you're using a fully private cloud, right, which is something that a lot of organizations are still doing, but if you're moving to a public cloud platform or a SaaS platform, you're going to see that there's a lot of limitations, a lot of opportunities as well, but it's definitely not just basically some servers in a different data center. Component B, right, is basically all about understanding that cloud security is not just continuing security that we've been doing on premises and extending it to the cloud. So it's basically a lot more than that. Security from the cloud, security in the cloud, these are all areas why that have just come into being, if you will, after infrastructure as a service kind of offerings have been born. So there's a lot of solutions out there, a lot of areas that really underscore that you can actually source security from the cloud for your cloud offerings or for your on-prem workloads as well. So what are some of the challenges around cloud security? Really, the user experience cannot change. So basically, users are used to, and administrators are used to certain ways of dealing with workloads. They really understand how they've been using on-premises workloads. They're used to this, and they're not very much willing to change. So you cannot really control the users. You really have no control over what users do. So basically, cloud security should not require users to change their behaviors or tools. The control is pretty inconsistent. So especially in a infrastructure service kind of environment, customer organizations usually do not control the hypervisor or below, and they don't really have no control over the hardware or the underlying infrastructure at all, network, equipment, and so on. So you don't really own everything, and it's basically the only thing most companies, most customer organizations can count on is the ownership of the guest virtual machines. The next thing is basically elasticity. Not all servers are steady state. We're seeing companies that in cloud security, they need to be able to adopt to things like cloud bursting, understanding that if there is a spike in load, so the load and the requirements, computing requirements go up, you have to basically start and spin up a lot of machines, each with its own real level of service and security configuration. When the load decreases, you're going to see stale servers, so servers that may not have been switched off and just kind of are sitting around. And so there's a lot of dynamic provisioning. And part of the challenge around cloud security, which is probably less of a problem with on-premises workloads, is that since you are paying for typically compute time, paying for uptime and uptime security, it's in your best interest to basically bring down and shut down machines when you don't use them. The problem with this is that when you're bringing up machines because the load increases again, the security configuration needs to happen instantaneously at build time or setup time. So all this is, if you have to kind of go ahead and work on security configurations of cloud workloads after you bootstrap them and you install them and set them up, that is a lost battle. So there's a lot of need for automation. So you cannot really manually go ahead and start patching and configuring newly booted servers in the cloud, right? So that's just not possible. New workloads that they're coming up, maybe by the hundreds. You cannot have your 2 or 3 system administrators logging into these machines and making the necessary security changes, configuration, management activities, and so on. Scalability, what this really means is you're going to have highly variable server counts, right? You have 1 dev server, 1,000 production web servers. Really, your cloud service provider does not care about this, but you have to be able to scale. So when things are being started up, security needs to be built in and shouldn't be configured manually. And portability, this is also a problem. We've seen a lot of organizations basically saying that we need to be able to manage multiple clouds. So we may be using a combination of infrastructure as a service provider in our production environments. We don't want to be logged into one set of controls. So basically, you have to have some portability of configuration changes, network security, and so on out there. So it's really a very important element. Some of the technical challenges that we see, and this is obviously very important, and we've done a number of surveys and talked to a fair number of customers that talk to us about this, is really data protection is everybody's concern. So anytime you move data to the cloud in the form of structured data to Salesforce or other CRM or ERP applications, you have to protect it. Anytime you store data in a workload at cStor, AWS, Azure, any infrastructure as a service provider, you set up a big database. Data in that database needs to be stored from rogue administrators and so on. The next thing is workload separation and multi-tenancy. What this really means is that if you're Coca-Cola, you don't want Pepsi-Cola to look at your files or your workloads and so on. So you have to have real strong Chinese walls between tenants in the environment. Information rights management, this is another huge thing. Assuming that you're a customer of a cloud service provider and you have some data living in that cloud, how are you going to share that data in an authorized and controlled way with your business partners, right? Especially if that business partner is not a customer of that cloud provider. So that's, again, an interesting question. So how you manage information rights is a big concern. SaaS providers really don't help much with security-related concerns. We've seen a number of customers that come to us and said that, hey, we had in our contract with the SaaS provider a special clause where, we could request security-related log files, and we had a breach, or we had reason to believe that we had a breach, and we asked for forensic data from our cloud service provider, from our SaaS provider, and they said they looked at this, but unfortunately they are not able to get this data, this log data to us because it contains information of other tenants, from other tenants. So it's really wasn't just a pure piece of information. So again, this is an interesting and big question out there. So the next area is clearly network security. It's all about how you actually connect your network workloads, your workloads in the cloud, private or public, to your on-premises environment. How you create the right firewall rules, how you create the right level of, maybe if you're using VPN, how do you connect cloud workloads to on-premises workloads. Identity and access management and privileged identity management are both huge questions. In essence, if you are running a workload in the cloud, right, how do your users log into that workload? So if you are running a Windows instance in the cloud at cStor or other cloud providers, how do you actually represent user information from your own Active Directory on premises towards that cloud-based workload? Even more important, or at least equally important from the breach and security perspective, is how you manage privileged users, admin users, root users on Linux, Unix systems, administrators on Windows systems, how they get access to these workloads. So if your organization is the only organization that can actually touch anything in terms of configuration changes or database changes on the guest operating system, that's great. But how about if you're using some third parties to do system administration for you? Or what about if if you contract the cloud provider itself or the staff of the cloud provider to actually do some system maintenance and operations for you? So these are all huge questions. BCDR, business continuity and disaster recovery. How do you actually copy? How do you do cloud-to-cloud backup? How do you do cloud-to on-premises backup? Are big questions, and how this data gets protected is also a relatively difficult question. And finally, log management. And as with any computing environment, right, workload in the cloud and even SaaS applications will continue to generate large amounts of data in log files. What do you do with these log files? How do you actually integrate these log files into an on-premises security event management system or into a cloud-based event management system? How can you do cyber threat intelligence on these log files is, again, a major problem. So these are all questions that people ask us all the time in challenges, and they found that while really in data protection, they love to transfer the responsibility from themselves to the cloud provider, right? Unfortunately, that's just not possible. So, a lot of regulations, including the Cloud Security Alliance Guidance version 3, says that when data is transferred to a cloud, the responsibility for protecting and securing the data really remains with the collector or custodian of that data. So it's, again, a huge element or huge problem for a lot of organizations. So there's no matter what you do, you cannot really get rid of the responsibilities of moving data to the cloud. that data. Identity access management is really a huge question. So where are you going to store your user information, or user store? Where it's going to be located? Is it an on-premises Active Directory? Is this store? Do you synchronize and copy all the Active Directory information to your cloud service provider, or is it going to be workload based? So is it going to be built into the workloads, right? So these are the three options. How will you work with single sign-on across the customer domain and the cloud service provider? So if you have set up, say, OpenAM or SiteMinder or IBM Security Access Manager for your on-premises workloads, how will that single sign-on work with the cloud-based workloads? Are you going to have to use federated services, SAML, OAuth, etc.? How will that fit? Privileged identity management for virtual infrastructures is also a very important element. If you're using any kind of virtualization hypervisor, then and you have access to that in a cloud environment, it is very important to understand who can stop and start various workloads on these hypervisors. How do you make sure that nobody can tap into the traffic that's moving between the guest operating system and the hypervisor? Nobody can actually listen and eavesdrop on that traffic. And again, going from the hypervisor to the actual physical storage is also an important point that you have to protect, or ask for some evidence of protection. Again, the more you can granularize these points, the more important, the better off you are. And again, logging of administrative actions on virtual infrastructures, we've seen this as a huge set of questions here. Obviously, in terms of network security, connecting on-prem workloads to cloud service provider-based workloads is the biggest question that we've seen. If you define software-defined networking or SDN, it obviously creates new risks. It can have data leaks because of misconfiguration or basically configuration management tracking of just SDN environments is relatively difficult. There's no persistency in these environments. You have to have very good controls over config changes. Configuration integrity monitoring is a huge question. How you set up files in workloads that are critical, etc system environments, etc password, various other files on Linux, Unix systems, as well as on Windows host files. How do you monitor for integrity of those files? Most organizations said that they need some sort of a capability for multi-cloud capable virtual private networking that allows them to connect all their workloads together. Intrusion detection and prevention is also a huge set of questions. So going back, so basically, how can you protect data in an environment, in a cloud-based environment? The first thing is that you'll have to look at discovery and tagging of information, understanding what specific data elements you have, what are the things that remain on premises, what are the elements that go to the cloud, and how you draw the line. Is there any kind of decision criteria that allows you to understand what stays on-prem and what goes to the cloud? Then the next thing that we see people looking at is risk assessment, understanding the risks around the data elements that you have to protect, and basically coming up with a long table, right, with criteria that prioritizes the data assets that you have to protect. Then you have to do some encryption. Obviously, people argue whether you need to encrypt everything or just your sensitive assets. We kind of see a combination and more cautious adoption as of today of encrypting everything. It's just too expensive, and it introduces some searching and sorting types of questions today. Even though we have format preserving encryption, homomorphic encryption that will allow you to do the searching and all that without having to decrypt the data, it's still not reality today. Then basically you really have to look at identity context. Who is the user who's trying to access the data? Why? What are their intent? What they're going to be doing with that data? Where that data is going? Who that data is going to be shared with? So there's a identity context and is really a very important element and an important question that we see out there. Then you do DLP on premises, and then you look at how users actually move data from your on-premises network to the cloud or out to the internet. Understand this, and really, if you are using cloud-based services, you should be looking at how you can use cloud-based DLP, understanding how if the data moves from an on-premises environment to a SaaS application or a workload or an infrastructure as a service type of environment, how do you make sure that you are doing some level of DLP in those cloud environments? How do you make sure that data cannot be exfiltrated from that cloud environment? So obviously, encryption in transit is very important when the data moves from the on-prem environment to the cloud environment, and then obviously as it moves into a cloud workload, you'd have to do a field-level encryption or encryption at the cloud vendor hypervisor level or at disk level. So basically, making sure that data is not basically stored in clear text is a huge task. And A and B, most companies tell us that they actually want to have control over the keys, encryption keys at all times, so not let the cloud provider do any work with the encryption keys. It's the client organization that actually wants to control the keys, or in some cases they want, the client organization wants to work with a cloud encryption vendor that can actually become a third party, watch the cloud service providers in a way, and basically be an independent third party in the process that is responsible for managing the keys for data encryption. So again, this is a very much layered approach, right? Nothing surprising here, but the steps are really important to look at here. A lot of log aggregation in cloud security. Availability of security logs can be a challenge in the first place. Basically, we've seen cloud service providers promising them but not providing them. Basically, doing log aggregation from the virtualization hypervisor, the guest operating system level, application level, or SaaS level is very important. Important to understand that the more granularly you can log user and admin events, the more you're able to stand up some forensics as needed in moving forward. And obviously, intrusion detection, intrusion prevention systems work basically on the firewall level, but also more recently they're looking at the behavioral profiling of applications, looking at application log files, trying to understand normal activities and separate from abnormal activities. So clearly, what we've seen, right, and this is just the next slide is clearly just some demonstration of this, and this trend really applies to most areas of cloud security and identity and access management, that in order for us to be able to protect our mothership in the middle, and that's the bigger ship in the middle, from all these torpedoes, to protect this bigger ship from these torpedoes coming at you, you have to have some sort of a searchlight. You have to be able to direct your attention to the enemies or threats that are coming at you. The problem with this, and in today's world, you have a lot of emerging and new threats out there that are really difficult to identify because they're well disguised and really come at you fast, zero-day attacks, and so on. So in today's environment, the explicit way of basically defining rules or defining antivirus definitions against signatures that we've seen in the past, and we're scanning the environment for the occurrence of all these activities is definitely something that we will have to keep doing. So we'll continue to monitor the environment for security risks based on a rules engine or rule engine, but it's not enough. So basically what we've seen is that in order for us to protect against new and emerging threats that we cannot necessarily identify at a time, we have to look at what we call behavior analysis. And what this thing really is, right, it's just a very easy way to look at it. You can look at user actions or machine actions or network log look at all areas, and try to understand how the user's behavior is different from their peer group, right? So how the user is behaving differently, like this Russian soldier sticking their tongue out, right, from everybody else in this picture. And also, in some instances, if you have some evidence or additional behavioral data on the user themselves, how has this soldier behaved before, right? Is this the first time they're exhibiting this behavior of sticking their tongue out, right? So it's really understanding behavioral elements in the process, making sure that you're building a behavioral baseline based on observed activities. Build a model using machine learning algorithms, unsupervised or supervised, things along the lines of support vector machines or decision trees, random forests, neural networks, and basically create some clusters of data points that you believe are normal and belong together, and then try to flag, identify, monitor anything that falls outside of the realm of those normal sets of activities. And we believe that this will be basically one of the biggest drivers for cloud security moving forward, to build in behavioral controls, behavioral policies and rules, and basically reduce the cost of rule management and improve the accuracy of threat detection. So with that, I really want to thank you for your attention, and this concludes my part of today's presentation, and hand it over to Sam.
Sorry for the delay there. Let's just make sure Sam has audio. Sam, are you there? It looks like your audio was open, and sorry about that. Go ahead, Sam.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Are you able to wrap up the presentation with a few closing thoughts on cloud and security?
I have Sam here with me.
Hello, everyone. What we're trying to do here is show the service offering that cStor would provide for assessing and building a cloud environment for our clients. And these are some really high-level things that we have to be concerned with. I come from a background of doing hybrid cloud implementation and designing and working with various clients, and these are some high-level points that we would cover as an engagement with cStor. So the first one would be the governance, and these are some of the real government regulations that are out there in healthcare and DoD and any kind of private sector client that would have to field an audit and then comply with some kind of government regulation. These are just a few of them, but very real compliance issues that you have to deal with when building a cloud environment. Auditing and business processes are understanding the business objectives, and with some of the government regulations in auditing a business, these are real documents that have to be filled out so that we understand, for instance, like the workflow for an ISO implementation of a cloud. And in many cases here, you're going to have, you start with a private cloud, but then your clients want to move towards a hybrid cloud, and then components will move towards a public cloud. Like it's been discussed before, the objectives would be what kind of data you're going to put into the public cloud as opposed to a hybrid cloud where the client and the integration team own some of those resources based on security. Then we have enforcement policies, which are basically how you get to the cloud, right? These are pieces of the design that cStor would be involved with their clients. For instance here, like an SLA, what is the objective and what is the return value to the client when moving into the cloud? thing, business continuity. Is your business capable of performing a real DR and moving your business to that cloud location and or secondary hybrid locations and operation of that business under that environment? And then last bullet here, and again, a lot of these are very high level here because it requires great detail and great understanding of what the client and the business is trying to do and what direction they're trying to move towards. The risk assessment and prevention, these are real things. These are some of the main objectives that the client has to overcome when moving his protected assets into, let's say, a cloud environment, whether it be hybrid or public or private, intrusion, data breaches, and the one that I suffered through in reality was a malicious insider threat where we had an inside employee take control of protected data and how we had to resolve that and actually deal with that person. And so these kinds of risks are out there, and there's a liability assessment with this. So understanding these topics, and cStor's one of our goals and our objectives is to help our clients do this so that they understand where their liabilities are and what the potential threats would be for implementation of, let's say, a hybrid or a public cloud. And again, this is high level. If you have any questions, feel free to contact your cStor integration team, sales team, and we'll be back with you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sam,
okay,
and
Kim.
Andras
Q&A.
and Larry, too. Yeah, thank you so much. At this time, I would like to open up the session for Q&A. As a reminder, please post any questions to the questions panel of your GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll take those out. Looks like we do have a couple from the attendees today. This looks like it's definitely for Andras. How do you see solutions priced in cloud security?
Sure. Some vendors price their solutions based on the number of instances protected. Others are charging by the number of administrative users in the solution, so if they're protecting some workloads, the number of admins that can log into the solution is the basis point. Typically between $300 to $500 per admin per year kind of costs. Or we see uptime, kind of security uptime. So basically, the uptime that you have security in on your cloud workload is basically the basis for pricing. And we have also seen some vendors actually looking at an uplift, percentage uplift on the cloud service provider's price. So that's probably the third way how we see this.
Excellent, thank you. We have a couple more questions. It looks like we'll try and squeeze them in. Also for Andras, how do IaaS vendors provide security in their own environments?
Sure. So basically, the IAM vendors really look at things like suspicious login activity. So understanding who logs in, making sure that the infrastructure as a service offering is protected from all sides, right? So understanding that they have some level of controls, two-factor authentication to the management console is another element. We've seen key management systems for being able to start and stop services machines. Some vendors in this space are taking over the directory, user directory information from the on-prem, so you don't have to kind of always go back and forth the cloud service provider and the on-premises network for user information. And we've also seen some cloud service providers looking at creating encryption at the storage level, encryption at the hypervisor level, really granularly controlling actions of admins if these are these hypervisors are made available to client administrators. And finally, really the whole privileged identity management aspect is really making sure that you have good control and governance over who has what admin password to the customer's environment. So that's these are probably the areas of security that infrastructure as a service providers can actually do.
Excellent, thank you. Great information. a final question. We've got a few minutes for that. How will the cloud security market evolve in Forrester's view over the next couple of years? What should we really prepare for?
Sure. So I think automation will be key. Being able to automate with DevOps tools, Chef, Puppet, and then others, for bringing up workloads and putting security into the cloud workloads at build time or at setup time. I think we're going to see a lot of out-of-the-box integration with existing identity and access management solutions for single sign-on and user account provisioning. Behavioral intelligence is, as I said, is going to really eliminate or reduce the burden of how people will have to manage rules or security policies in these environments. And really, I think we're going to see a lot of emphasis of cloud service providers really understanding security requirements along their entire value chain that they provide to their customers, and really turning security into a competitive differentiator. So it's clearly obviously beyond or in addition to the normal service level agreement, physical security, but bringing logical security and creating competitive differentiation element out of logical security against competition is, I believe, is going to be an interesting development moving forward.
Great, thank you. That's great information. Thank you for the great